The first time I saw the Cloud album notification pop up, I was sitting in our kitchen, the evening sunlight painting gold streaks across the marble countertop. My wife, Marissa, was humming in the next room, folding laundry with the precision of a surgeon. Socks paired, shirts squared, not a wrinkle out of line. I remember thinking how normal everything felt, how soft the world seemed in that moment. In retrospect, normal is a lie we tell ourselves when the truth would burn too much. The notification blinked again. Shared album, new photos added. The album's name, June Memories, looked so innocuous, almost sweet. I opened it without thinking, distracted by the scent of fresh basil and the hum of the dishwasher. If I had hesitated even a second, maybe the story would have ended differently. But then, what do you do when the world asks you to look? You look. The first photo was of Marissa, smiling wide, the kind of smile she saved for special occasions. But the background wasn't our home, or her office, or any place I recognized. Instead, it was a hotel room, modern, anonymous, a city skyline peeking through the window. She was holding a glass of wine, cheeks flushed, hair tousled in a way I'd never seen before. A second photo appeared, her hand entwined with someone else's, a man's wristwatch shining like an accusation. My skin prickled. I scrolled. More selfies, more receipts, each tagged with the hotel's name, each time-stamped for nights I was out of town. I felt the air leaving my lungs, a slow suffocation. The world tilted, and I gripped the countertop, knuckles white. I stared at the receipts, room service, spa charges, a dinner for two. Each line item was a confession, colder than any spoken word. I heard Marissa's humming falter, then stop. She stepped into the kitchen, her arms full of laundry, her eyes meeting mine. Did she know? Did she sense the shift? I tried to speak, but my voice was lost, adrift in a sea of silent questions. It was only the beginning. Marissa and I met in grad school, both ambitious, both hungry for something more than what our small-town beginnings had offered. She was the kind of woman who could walk into any room and command attention, not by loudness, but by an effortless grace. I fell hard and so did she, or so I believed at the time. We built our lives together brick by brick, careers, a mortgage, dinner parties, inside jokes whispered in the dark. Her father, Charles, was a looming presence from the start. A self-made man, sharp-eyed and silver-haired, he made no secret of his distrust for me. I was, in his words, earnest but untested. A handshake with him felt like a contract. When Marissa and I announced our engagement, he invited me to lunch at his club, a cathedral of mahogany, brass, and unspoken rules. He was cordial but direct. "You love my daughter?" "I do," I replied, voice steady. "Good. Then you'll understand why I need you to sign this." He pushed a thick envelope across the table. I opened it. Prenuptial agreement. It was fair, even generous, but it was also unmistakably clear. If Marissa ever betrayed our vows, every asset, every future plan reverted to me. She would walk away with nothing but her personal belongings. I hesitated, feeling the weight of his gaze. "Why?" I asked. He leveled me with that still hard stare. "Because I've seen what betrayal does to a family. If you're loyal, you have nothing to fear." And so I signed. The moment was forgotten, buried under champagne toasts and wedding dances, until now. The photos haunted me, replaying in my mind like a fever dream. I tried to rationalize, to find a loophole in reality. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe the receipts were for business. Maybe. But then came the messages. The Cloud album was only the beginning. Soon, a text arrived from an unknown number. "You deserve the truth," it read, followed by a link. More photos. Marissa, laughing, a different man's arm around her shoulders. A selfie in a hotel mirror, the same skyline, the same wristwatch. My heart pounded, each beat echoing the question I could barely ask. Who was he? I needed answers, but confrontation felt impossible. I watched Marissa for days, waiting for a sign, for a slip. She was careful, almost rehearsed. But the cracks were there. Late nights at work, the scent of cologne that wasn't hers, the way she bristled when I touched her phone. One night, as she showered, I opened her laptop. I shouldn't have, but the world had already shifted. Her browser history told the story. Maps to the hotel, emails with a man named E. My hands trembled. I clicked through, reading the words that would unravel our life. I miss you. Last night was perfect. Let's meet again. There was no denying it now. The world I'd built was a facade, and behind it, something rotten festered. I waited until dawn to confront her, the weight of sleepless hours pressing on my chest. She came into the kitchen, wrapped in a sweater, hair damp from the shower. I tried to find the right words, but they scattered like autumn leaves. "Who is he?" I asked, voice raw. She froze. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, calculating. "What are you talking about?" I showed her the photos, the receipts, the messages. Silence hung between us, thick and suffocating. She looked away, jaw clenched. "How did you?" "It doesn't matter. Just tell me the truth." For a moment, I thought she'd lie, spin a story, beg for forgiveness. But something broke in her. She slumped into a chair, face in her hands. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never meant for you to find out." Her confession spilled out in fragments: loneliness, boredom, the thrill of secrecy. She told me about E, a colleague from work, someone who listened when she felt invisible. She tried to justify, to explain, but the words were hollow. I remembered Charles's prenup, the document I'd signed years before, now pulsing with new significance. I told her, quietly, what it meant. She stared at me, disbelief slowly morphing into panic. "What do you mean?" she asked, voice shaking. "If you walk away, you leave with nothing. That was the deal your father made me sign." Her face drained of color. She tried to argue, to plead, but the facts were immutable. Betrayal had a price, and now she would pay it. The aftermath was brutal. Marissa moved out, her belongings packed in boxes, the silence of our home stretching into days. I felt hollowed out, every memory tainted by her deceit. Friends called, offering sympathy, but their words rang empty. I drifted through the weeks, numb, until a letter arrived from Charles. He invited me to his office, the same place where the prenup had been signed. I expected anger, blame, maybe even threats. Instead, he was quiet, almost mournful. "I'm sorry," he said, voice thick. "I hoped she'd be better than her mother." I frowned, unsure what he meant. "She doesn't know," he continued. "Her mother, my wife, did the same thing, years ago. That prenup was my shield, but it couldn't save me. I thought it might save you." I saw the pain in his eyes, the scars of old wounds. In that moment, I understood the legacy of betrayal, how it shapes families, echoes through generations. Charles wasn't a villain, he was a survivor. Months passed. I rebuilt my life, piece by piece. The cloud album was deleted, the receipts filed away. I learned to trust again, slowly, cautiously. I carried the lessons of betrayal like stones in my pocket, heavy but grounding. One evening, I sat in the kitchen, the sunlight painting gold across the countertop. I poured a glass of wine, breathing in the quiet. The world felt softer, not because it was safe, but because I had survived. If you found this story moving, please like, comment, and subscribe for more. Charles's admission haunted me for days. That quiet, fragile moment in his office, when the man who'd always seemed so invulnerable finally let the past slip through the cracks, echoed through my mind in the hush of my empty house. The truth was, I didn't know if he'd meant to comfort me or warn me, maybe both. Even so, it was oddly grounding. I wasn't alone in this strange, bitter country of betrayal. People survived here. They built new lives from the rubble. I could too. But when Marissa texted me, my heart still stuttered in my chest. Her name on my phone, that familiar tone, felt like a dare. She wanted to talk, she said. Just talk. She'd left some things behind. Her favorite scarf, a mug she always used, a framed picture of us at the lake, and could she come by and pick them up? I agreed, against my better judgment. Maybe I needed to see her face again, to prove to myself that the chapter was really closed. She arrived in the late afternoon. The sun was sinking, casting long, golden beams through the living room windows. Marissa stood in the doorway, hair pulled back, face pale but carefully made up. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. "Hey," she said quietly. "Hey." My voice was rough. "Your stuff's in the guest room." She walked past me, eyes downcast. For a moment, neither of us said anything, the air between us thick with words neither of us knew how to speak. She gathered her things quickly, but lingered at the door. "Do you hate me?" she asked, suddenly, voice trembling. I shook my head, though the truth was more complicated than that. "I don't. I wish I could. It would be easier if I did." She flinched as if I'd struck her.
"I'm sorry," she said, and her eyes brimmed with tears. "I know it doesn't fix anything, but I ruined everything." I watched her struggle for words, for meaning, for forgiveness, maybe for a way back that didn't exist. I remembered the first time I saw her cry, years before, when her old dog died. I'd held her then, promising everything would be okay. I couldn't promise her that now. "I need to move on, Marissa, for both of us." She nodded, wiped her eyes, and stepped out into the evening. I closed the door, pressing my forehead against the cool wood, and let myself breathe. That night, sleep was thin and restless. I kept replaying the last few months, the hotel selfies, the receipts, the lies. I wondered what would have happened if I'd never seen those photos, if the cloud album had stayed private. Would I still be living in that soft blanket of denial, suspecting nothing? Or would the truth have found a way to surface eventually? Maybe the universe has a way of forcing your eyes open when you most want them shut. I took a long walk the next morning. The trees were turning, gold and crimson, the world shifting toward winter. I tried to catalog what I'd lost, but the list was too long and shifting. Trust, certainty, the sense that love once given was unbreakable. The next weeks blurred together. I tried to bury myself in work, in old hobbies I'd neglected. I reconnected with friends who'd quietly drifted away during my marriage. One night, over beers, my oldest friend Tom asked the question I'd been avoiding. "What now? You gonna just let this define you?" I bristled at first, but then shrugged. "I don't know. I guess I have to figure out who I am now." He grinned. "Good, because the you I remember, he's still in there. Maybe it's time you found him again." That stuck with me. For so long, I'd been half of something. Now, I had to be whole on my own. I started running again, something I hadn't done in years. The steady rhythm, the burn in my lungs gave me back a sense of control. Each mile took me a little further from the pain, a little closer to something like peace. I'd run at dusk, the sky streaked with purple and orange, and breathe in the cold air, trying to leave the bitterness behind with every footfall. But healing wasn't linear. Some nights the memory swarmed. Marissa's laughter, her touch, the way she used to say my name. And then in the same moment, the sting of betrayal, the flash of those hotel selfies. I wondered if she ever thought of me, or if her new life had already eclipsed what we'd shared. Then one evening, I got an email from her. Just the subject line, "Please read," sent my heart racing. It was long, rambling, confessional. She wrote about her guilt, about not recognizing the damage she'd done until it was too late. She told me she was in therapy, trying to understand why she'd thrown away something so precious. She said she hoped one day I could forgive her, not for her sake, but for mine. I reread her words, searching for anger, for blame, but found only sorrow.
Maybe she was changing, maybe not. It didn't matter. I realized that forgiveness wasn't about letting her off the hook. It was about setting myself free. A few weeks later, I ran into Charles at the grocery store. He looked older, wearier, but when he saw me, he smiled. "You holding up?" "I think so," I said. He hesitated, then put a hand on my shoulder. "You'll get through this, stronger even. But don't let it make you hard. That's the real danger." I nodded, unsure if I could promise that. When I got home, I dug through old boxes in the attic, looking for something, anything, to anchor me in the past before everything had frayed. I found a photo album from the early days of our marriage. There we were, grinning, arms around each other, so young and certain. I stared at our faces, at the hope in our eyes. It hurt, but it also reminded me that I was capable of joy once. That night, I started writing. Not to Marissa, not to Charles, but to myself. I poured out everything, the betrayal, the anger, the grief, the tiny seeds of hope. I wrote until my hand cramped, until the sun began to rise. It wasn't a letter of forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. As autumn slid into winter, I found a rhythm. I cooked meals for myself, learned new recipes. I read novels I'd always meant to read. I took up photography, walking the city at dawn, capturing the way light spilled across buildings, the hush of empty streets. I started to see beauty again, in small, unexpected places. One morning, I got a call from Charles. He sounded anxious. "Can you come by the house? There's something I need to show you." Curiosity piqued, I drove over. He met me at the door, ushered me into his study. There, on his desk, was a folder. He slid it toward me. "I found this in some of Marissa's old things," he said. "Thought you should have it." Inside was a stack of letters, ones I'd written to her over the years. Anniversary notes, birthday cards, silly doodles. I'd forgotten most of them. Charles watched me read, his expression unreadable. "She kept every one," he said quietly. I didn't know what to say. The letters were a map of our love story before it all went wrong. I felt a strange gratitude, even as it ached. "Thank you," I said, tucking them under my arm. As I left, Charles called after me. "You deserve better. Don't forget that." Driving home, I replayed his words. Did I believe them? I wanted to. That weekend, Tom dragged me out to a party, a friend of a friend, someone I barely knew. I almost didn't go, but at the last minute, I forced myself. I needed to be around people, even if I felt out of place. The house was packed, laughter and music spilling out onto the porch. I nursed a drink, making small talk with strangers. At some point, I found myself chatting with a woman named Elise. She had kind eyes, a quick wit. We talked about books, travel, the best breakfast spots in town. There was no spark, not yet, but it felt good to connect, to laugh. As the evening wound down, she slipped me her number. "If you ever want to go for coffee," she said, smiling. I walked home under the stars, the city humming around me. For the first time in months, I felt something like hope. The next morning, I called her. Coffee led to lunch, then to long walks in the park. We talked about everything and nothing, our conversations easy, unforced. I told her about my marriage, about Marissa, about the mess I was still untangling. She listened, didn't judge. One afternoon, as we sat on a bench watching the river, Elise turned to me. "You know, you're not broken, just bruised." I smiled, feeling the truth of her words settle in my chest. As winter deepened, Elise. Spring came slowly, as if the city itself was uncertain about the change. Trees budded with tentative green, and I found myself walking those streets with Elise more often, letting the air clear some of the lingering fog inside me. There were still days when Marissa's betrayal felt fresh, like a paper cut that never quite healed. But more and more, those days faded into the background, replaced by the quiet comfort of new routines. Elise and I laughed easily, and she had a way of pulling me out of my own head. She'd notice tiny things, a stray cat perched on a stoop, the scent of cinnamon drifting from a bakery, and suddenly I'd be present, not lost in regret. She didn't pry, but she didn't let me wallow either. When I'd start to slip into bitterness, she'd squeeze my hand or change the subject, steering me back to the moment. One evening, we were sitting across from each other in a cozy Italian restaurant, the kind with mismatched chairs and flickering candles. She swirled her wine, watching me. "Do you ever wish you could go back?" she asked quietly. I hesitated. The question was simple, but the answer was tangled. Sometimes, I wish I'd seen the signs sooner. Maybe, I don't know, stopped it. Or at least been less blindsided. She nodded, her gaze steady. "But you're here now. You survived it. That's something." It was something. I realized how much I'd been measuring my worth against Marissa's choices, as if her betrayal defined me. But that was over. I was learning to define myself again, not as a victim, but as someone moving forward. Elise's phone buzzed, and she excused herself to take the call. Left alone, I studied the other couples in the room. Old lovers quietly sharing pasta, young ones leaning in, giddy and hopeful. I wondered if any of them had secrets tucked away in their phones, receipts and photos hidden in digital corners. The thought made me uneasy, but I reminded myself, trust is a risk, always, but living without it is worse. Elise returned, apologetic. "Work drama," she said, rolling her eyes. "Nothing urgent." I smiled, grateful for her presence. We paid the bill, stepping out into the cool night, and she linked her arm in mine. The city was humming, headlights gliding past, voices floating from open windows. I felt alive in a way I hadn't for a long time. Over the next few weeks, I settled into a new rhythm. Work kept me busy, and Elise was a steady presence, never demanding, always encouraging. My friends noticed the change. Tom teased me about getting my groove back, which made me laugh more than it should have. But healing isn't linear. Sometimes, in the middle of a good day, I'd be hit with a wave of anger or sadness. A song on the radio, a familiar scent, even a stray thought could yank me back to that hotel room, those damning photos. I learned not to fight it, just to let it pass, like a storm. Elise understood. She'd listen when I needed to talk, distract me when I didn't. One night, I found myself scrolling through old messages on my phone, half out of habit, half out of morbid curiosity. There, buried in a thread with Marissa from years before, was a photo of us at our wedding, smiling, oblivious. For a moment, I wanted to erase it, delete every trace of her from my life. But I didn't. That was part of my story too. A week later, Charles called. I hadn't heard from him since that day in his office. He sounded tired, older somehow. "I wanted to check in," he said. "How are you holding up?" I hesitated, unsure how honest to be. "Better, getting there." He sighed. "Good. I've been thinking about that prenup. I know it seemed harsh, but I just wanted you to be safe." I remembered his words, his regret. "I understand now. I really do." "Marissa's with her mother," he said quietly. They have their own mess to deal with." I sensed a sadness in him, an exhaustion that went beyond disappointment. "Thank you, Charles, for everything." He paused. "You deserve the truth. I'm sorry it came this way." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet, feeling the end of something, an era, a chapter, a wound closing. I wasn't angry anymore, not at Charles, not even at Marissa. Some betrayals are bigger than us, passed down like heirlooms. I could only choose what to carry forward. Summer came, bringing warmth and long evenings. Elise and I spent hours in the park, sharing picnic dinners, talking about everything from childhood dreams to favorite movies. She challenged me, made me laugh, made me think. I found myself wanting things again, a future, maybe even love. One afternoon, as we lay in the grass, sunlight dappling our faces, Elise turned to me. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. I knew what she meant. Was I ready to let go of the past, to trust again, to risk my heart? I looked at her, at the gentle strength in her eyes. "I think I am." We kissed, and the city seemed to exhale around us. Later that night, I sent Marissa a message. Not angry, not accusatory, just closure. I hope you find what you're looking for, I wrote. I'm moving on. She replied hours later. I'm sorry, I wish I could change things. I stared at the screen, feeling nothing but relief. Days turned into weeks, and my life grew quieter, simpler. I saw friends, worked, spent time with Elise. The Cloud album was a distant memory, a lesson learned. I kept my guard up, but I let it down too. That was the risk and the reward. One evening, Elise and I hosted friends for dinner. The apartment was filled with laughter, the clink of glasses, the smell of roasted garlic. Tom pulled me aside, grinning. You're different, he said, lighter. I shrugged, smiling. I guess I am. After everyone left, Elise and I sat on the balcony, watching the city glow. Thank you, I said, for sticking with me. She squeezed my hand, always. As the night deepened, I realized I'd come full circle. Betrayal had changed me, but it hadn't broken me. I'd learned to trust again, not blindly, but with open eyes. And I was grateful for the pain, the growth, the second chance. If you felt this story, please like, comment, and subscribe for more. As the season shifted and the city's chill gave way to gentle spring afternoons, I found myself awakening to small, bright possibilities. Elise and I kept building something real, one honest conversation at a time, and I was finally able to lean into the quiet joy of everyday intimacy. A laughter shared over burnt toast, her hand slipping into mine as we navigated the Saturday market, the stillness of her head on my shoulder as we watched old movies. The certainty that had abandoned me in that hotel room with Marissa's digital betrayal was returning, though in a softer, more mature form. Less a shield, more a gentle warmth in my chest. One rainy Sunday, as we lazed in bed, Elise asked, "Do you think you could ever trust someone completely again?" I took a long breath, listening to the germ of water against the window. Not the way I used to, I admitted, but maybe that's a good thing. She nodded, tracing circles on my wrist. I don't want blind trust, I want earned trust, built together. That stuck with me. The old me, the me from before the receipts and the selfies and the Cloud album, might have tried to erase his doubts, to surrender wholly. Now I understood that trust was not a gift you gave once, but a garden you tended, sometimes in sunshine, sometimes in the rain. Some nights, though, the past still visited me. I'd wake from dreams of hotel corridors and unfamiliar voices, my heart pounding, convinced for a moment that it was happening all over again. Elise would wake too and just hold me. She never pushed, never asked for details unless I was ready. Her patience became my anchor. Spring turned to summer and our circle of friends grew. Tom, loyal as ever, joined us for barbecues and game nights. His approval meant more than I'd expected. One night, as we cleaned up after everyone had left, he cornered me in the kitchen. "She's good for you," he said quietly, loading plates into the dishwasher. "You look alive again." I smiled, feeling the truth of it. I feel alive again. "Don't let the past steal this," he warned. "You deserve to be happy." I wanted to believe that. I was starting to. One Saturday, Elise suggested a weekend away, a cabin by the lake, just the two of us. I hesitated at first, worried that leaving my routines would unearth old anxieties, but she squeezed my hand. "Fresh air, no distractions. Let's make some new memories." We drove out of the city, the skyline shrinking behind us, the woods thickening around the narrow roads. The cabin was simple but perfect. Creaky floors, wide windows, the scent of pine everywhere. I breathed deeper than I had in months. That first night, as we sat on the porch watching the moonlight ripple across the water, Elise pulled out her phone. "I made a new album," she said, showing me a folder labeled Us Adventures. My breath caught. For a moment, the memory of Marissa's hidden album flashed behind my eyes. Hotel selfies, digital receipts, the sharp betrayal of a secret shared with everyone but me. I must have tensed, because Elise set her phone down and folded her hands in her lap. "Hey," she whispered, We only put in what we both want, no secrets. I let out a shaky laugh. Old ghosts, sorry. She took my hand, her thumb warm and steady. Let's fill this with the good stuff, only the good stuff. I nodded, and together we snapped a photo. Messy hair, sleepy smiles, the lake behind us. A new memory, honest and unburdened. Over breakfast the next morning, we talked about everything. Our families, our fears, where we saw ourselves in 5 years. I told her about Charles, about the day he handed me the prenup and the burden of his own heartbreak. I think he was trying to protect me, I said, stirring my coffee. But maybe he was just trying to protect himself, too. Elise sipped her tea, thoughtful. We all carry things from the past. The trick is not letting them make all our decisions for us. The rest of that weekend felt like a slow exhale. We hiked, swam, watched thunderstorms roll in over the water. Each moment, small as it was, felt like a part of something bigger, a life rebuilt, not from denial, but from acceptance. Back in the city, real life resumed. Work deadlines, bills, the familiar rhythm of routine. But I noticed I was different. I was no longer waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was learning to trust the ground beneath me again. One night, Elise invited me to a dinner with her parents. I'd been nervous, of course. After everything with Marissa's family, the idea of meeting the parents carried a weight I couldn't quite shake. But her parents were nothing like Charles and his wife. Warm, a little quirky, genuinely interested in my story. Her father asked about my work, her mother about my favorite books. There were no veiled warnings, no business contracts slipped across the table. Just a family, open and imperfect, inviting me in. As we walked back to her apartment, Elise laughed at something her mother had said. "They like you," she teased. "I like them too," I admitted, surprised by how much I meant it. We paused at her door, the city quiet around us. "Would you ever want to try living together?" she asked, eyes searching mine. The question took me off guard, but after a heartbeat, I realized I wanted that. Wanted it more than I'd let myself admit. "Yeah," I said, "I really would." We spent the next weeks looking at apartments. Tiny, sunlit studios, creaky walk-ups with too much charm, sleek new builds we couldn't possibly afford. Each place we visited, we imagined a life. Coffee on the balcony, dinner parties, lazy Sunday mornings. Eventually, we found it. A corner unit on the 3rd floor with just enough space for our books and dreams. The first night we moved in, we lay on the floor surrounded by boxes and ate pizza straight out of the box. "This is it," Elise whispered, curling into my side. "Yeah," I said, feeling the truth settle deep in my bones. This is it. There were still hard days, work stress, minor arguments, the old insecurities that sometimes poked their heads above the surface. But the difference now was we faced them together. When I felt the urge to retreat, to hide behind silence, Elise reached for me. When she had a rough day, I listened, really listened. One rainy afternoon, I found myself alone, sorting through an old drawer. At the bottom, beneath a stack of faded receipts, I found the prenup Charles had made me sign. I turned it over in my hands, remembering how powerless I'd felt, how convinced I was that I needed protection. Now I realized I didn't need it anymore, not because betrayal was impossible, but because I'd learned how to survive it. I'd learned that trust wasn't a guarantee. It was a choice, made every day. That evening, I tossed the prenup into the shredder. The past was never truly gone, but it didn't have to define my future. Elise came home, shaking off her umbrella, and saw the look on my face. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said, meeting her eyes. "Everything's good." She smiled, and for the first time in a long time, I believed it. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like, comment, or subscribe for more stories like this. If this story resonated with you, drop a comment and hit like. It really helps the channel. And subscribe for more true stories.